So shall I start? Now our quorum is complete. 28, 29 students are there. Can you see the screen?
No, sir.
Huh?
No,
Can
sir.
you? No.
No, sir. No, sir.
1 minute, 1 minute. Okay, now you can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Almost after a gap of almost 1 month, now I am taking a lecture. Last time we have taken lecture on 15th of September. Now this is almost 13th of October. Maybe as I was involved in preparation of exam, online exam, and yesterday that exam started smoothly. So now I am in a position to take the exam. So anyway, uh, what we are going to cover today is general PC troubleshooting. You know already what is troubleshooting. That is to repair or to find a faults. Let us say if you are not expert. I mean if you are not expert in computer or basically if you are not expert in electronics, that is hardware. Even if you wanted to find what is exactly the problem with the PC, then this lecture probably will be useful to all, even if you do not have any background of electronics. Still, you should be in a position to find what is exactly the problem with the PC. So, here I'm going to cover almost the 10 typical problems that are associated with PC and how those problems can be resolved, or what is the step-by-step procedure, or how you can diagnose the problem and you can come to certain conclusion that this is the problematic part where you have to concentrate. Again, if you broadly classify this troubleshooting, there are two types of troubleshooting. Mostly the problems could be hardware, or most of the times problem could be with the software, or some can be both hardware as well as software. Then how to distinguish these type of problems? So here you will find, as here I have listed almost 10 problems. One very first problem, let us say we'll go one by one. The very first problem is external case related problems. One may say that what is the problem with the case? But yes, there can be a typical problem with the case, especially if your motherboard is not fixed properly, or the proper care is not taken, or if there is no isolation between the say metal part as well as the motherboard part. So this is a proper care is taken. In fact, there are a screw and some fixtures are there. With this fixture, this keyboard, your motherboard is firmly fixed to the cable case without touching it. That you have to carefully observe. Sometimes when you are actually fault finding the or packing up this particular case along with certain external components, then at that time it is possibility that some part like screw might be unnoticed pending inside a case, and if that touches to certain tracks of your motherboard, probably that may short. So this is very rare possibility, but yes, this is a one type of problems which you can observe when you open your case. Then the second problem, that is mostly, as I said, almost 40% problems of the PC are related to your power supply. We have already seen the details related to power supply. Now, how we can diagnose the problem is basically related to power supply. Very first is that if there is no fan spinning, that means if the fan is not rotating, or if you do not find any sound of your fan running, then you can definitely say the problem is with the fan. In fact, here if no LED on front side or on the motherboard, if you just switch on, immediately that LED glows if it receives the power. If there is no LED, obviously that's a power supply problems could be there. Then most easiest problem if you find that yes, if you are certain that the problem is with the motherboard, how to find out? The very first, as I shown on the sixth line, you can short the wire, that is green and black wire. So these are the typical two wires. If these are, you have to take a simple wire and you have to short these two terminals. That is one wire which is terminating green wire and black wire. If you short those particular wires, automatically you'll find that if your supply is working condition, it fan will automatically start spinning. Remember always that this is internally when you fix up your power supply socket, that is we normally say ATX power supply socket. When you fix up on the motherboard, at that time this internally gets shorted. But if you remove that particular socket, then in that case, if you remove from a case your power supply, and even if you give the power to power supply, 100% your fan will not start rotating. When it starts rotating, that is when it receives only when you short this green and black wire. So if you remove your power supply, externally you require to short these two things. Then you will find that your fan is working. At least 230 power supply is received to your power supply, and your power supply probably start once fan starts spinning. At least you can 50% you can say at least power is okay. Let us say if the power is not okay, you can test the mains plug, that is the source plug. You can also test with a good working cable. If you find the if you cable is you found to be suspected or a burn somewhere or a broken somewhere, or it is not continuing, continuity is not there, then in that case you can replace with the another good working cable, and you can check it whether still it is not working or not. Then the best way to ensure that for your power supply is working or not, you at least if you have a multimeter, you already have studied now. These are the if you can see this particular orange pin, orange black, you will get plus 3.3 volts. If you say black and red, then you will get 5 plus volt. And if you see about yellow wire and black wire, you will get plus 12 volts. If you could able to get these three holes accurately, then you can say somewhere about that, not necessarily 3.3. If it is 3.1, 3.2, 3.5, maybe plus or minus about 0.2, 0.3% difference. Even if it is there, it's okay. That means your power supply is working. That is the best way of checking your power supply is okay or not if you have a multimeter. Without multimeter also, you can judge your power supply is faulty or not. So these are the normal procedure that you can carry out to just ensure whether your power supply is working or not. Then the most typical problem that you might face here in this case. So, so here the typical problems probably you face is the motherboard related problems, and there are a lot of cases. There can be many reasons why your motherboard is not working. Very first, if you want to troubleshoot this, obviously to fault diagnosis this, you will require to open the system. Then, if possible, you remove your motherboard. Whenever you want to remove the motherboard, most of the times various connections are done, various wires are going from motherboard. So if you know this, you can very easily remove all these particular wires. All these you can remove motherboard from the case. Then you can have certain visual inspection of the motherboard. And while doing this visual inspection of the motherboard, check all connected devices on working motherboard to ensure that all devices are working. Basically, you do not require to connect all the devices just to see that whether PC is working or not. Just take your motherboard, connect your power supply, connect your basic devices, that is keyboard and mouse. Ensure that the RAM and CPU, or if it is a graphic processing unit, if it exists, it is in place. Then give the required power supply to CPU and fan, and then just switch on from the power that switch button which you have. Then from that also you'll come to know the these are the minimum connections that you require to have on a motherboard. Let's see now, unplug the supply. If there is a problem when you are working with the power supply, as I said, there is always a 230 voltage, or even that backup capacitor might have 400 450 volts. Then this is always dangerous if you're working with the power supply. Don't touch to your power supply. Or if you want that, even there are certain voltages that might exist on your motherboard or in related parts. Just to discharge everything, all the voltages, just do one thing: keep your on off button at least 50-second off position, so that if there is any charge on certain components, that will automatically discharge and you will not have any shocks, or high voltage will not be there on this. Then the very first reason, if your motherboard is failure, if you do not get any beeps, and now we have already studied beeps and error messages. If you do not get any beeps or there is no display, obviously there is fault with the motherboard. Then also you can check whether the LED indicator lamp or lamps on motherboard. I'll find almost 99% of the motherboard, they are having one LED indicator on their motherboard. If you just switch on that motherboard, you will find that this normally a green LED is there. That green LED automatically glows. So that indicates that the power is given to the motherboard and motherboard is relatively okay. Then the most problematic part is that you have to check the RAM. So for then if RAM is fine, then check all the possible cables, then power supply. Then also check voltages on power supply socket, whether you really get the desired voltages on power supply socket, or what we call as the 3.3 volts, 5 volts, 12 volts on respective ATX power supply socket. Then check the RAM. If you feel that, then if there is additional slots are available, change the position of the RAM, because there is no problem as such. You can put RAM on any location. If the all locations are parallel, then in that case you will find that you can change the RAM and you can put the RAM in any position. Unless the slots are different, then you have to take care. Otherwise, if the slots are similar, then you can put RAM in any slots. Then check motherboard compatibility support for CPU. That means whether you also should know that whether this particular motherboard supports to the given CPU. Hopefully, if this will be the problem only for the first time when you are putting a CPU on the motherboard, because probably it is the only time where you need to check the compatibility of that CPU with this motherboard. If it is working motherboard and it has got a problem, that means certainly your CPU supports that particular motherboard. Check power button, whether it is good or broken or somewhere like, or whether it is stuck up. Most of the times power switch button gets stuck up and you will find that there will not be any displays onto your motherboards, or maybe on a front side. Then most of the time you can check your power cable is good or not. And so you can check the PGS wire, that is power good signal. In fact, this is the wire which is normally a gray color wire, and if you see this particular wire, it actually carries the voltages from power. So once the voltages are stable into your power supply, then this PGS actually gives the power to the motherboard and CPU, and then it actually then post starts. So you can also check whether the uh, 5-volt supply is available on your PGS wire. Next is you can check wires connected, whether these are connected at a wrong place. I mean, here you have to check whether all the wires are being connected at the correct or proper places. You can also check the connected, whether the connector is correctly connected to the power switch pin on the motherboard. So these are the certain 18-20 steps which you can perform, and you can diagnosis from this whether what is the problem with the motherboard. Remember, we are not going in details about the chip level, and that is not possible also. So here, if you have certain testers, then most of the time certain companies have got their motherboard tester, but these motherboard testers are available with the very advanced people who actually goes for troubleshooting of actual motherboard, which where they can work on component basis, or maybe on whenever you require to replace certain ICs or even CPUs, or that time probably you may require to go for it. But today we are not going in detail. As I said, we are not going in details. We are just going that how a layman can understand what probably the problems in PC and how to rectify it. So these are the 18 problems as I discussed. These are on motherboard. Let's go to the next, that is the fourth part. What are the problems related to processor? You have to check the CPU is properly installed, that is properly placed or properly fixed. Your CPU should be properly inserted, fixed its pin, or maybe with most of the times now we will find all the CPUs are horizontal CPU, normally with the chip socket, that is zero insertion port socket. And you can place it properly. You have to check it whether it is proper or not. Then also you have to see in BIOS whether your CPU should not be overclocked. CPU fans should be properly connected because early nowadays, whatever the core CPUs are there, they require to have additional fans for cooling purpose. See that these are properly connected. Check for CPU is not overheating. Normally, if a CPU gets overheated, then you will find that during normal operation, if a temperature exceeds of the CPU than the preset limit, then your PC automatically stops working, and your in fact it your system stops the CPU from functioning or for further damage. So that is the setting of that is done normally by. So this is when the problem sometimes when in say summer period or if it is a very hot period and if you're suddenly if your PC stops, probably you can say that this is because the system has stopped CPU because of it has crossed its set limit. Then check for proper thermal pasting. This is especially required because whatever the heat sinks that is put onto your CPU, this is normally cemented with what is called as a thermal pasting, just to have a smooth or easy flow of heat from the CPU, and it will be easily dissipated to your heatsink. Then finally check CPU initializes and start the post test. So if you could get certain bips, then you can see that there is no problem with the either motherboard or processor. If you get certain that very first start, when it starts when it start post, sometimes most of the biases gives the bips. And if you could get a bip, that means your CPU and processor is good. Now the most problems, again as I said, 40 to 50% problems related with your power supply. Again I will say if your PC do not start, again 20% times your RAM is faulty. So you have to see how you can diagnose RAM related problems and how you can overcome that. So the very first, it is relatively easy to troubleshoot and repair RAM related problems because most of the times if you find if the RAM is problematic and when you start and when your post starts and if a RAM is problematic, it will give a long beep followed by two short beeps continuously. That and then if you get such type of beeps, continuous beeps, one long beep and followed by two short beeps continuously, then it refers that normally you have to refer to your bias beep codes, but this is normally beep codes coming from RAM. And if you get continuous sound, that means definitely there is a problem with the RAM. Then what you can do, there are two ways you can do. For a problem with the either problem can be with the RAM slot, it can be with the RAM chip. That means your chip can be faulty or your slot might have a dirt or it might you need to clean. Then if there is a slot problem, I'll suggest you clean the RAM slot, check it by connecting it in similar other working motherboard. If possible, you can also check your RAM whether it is, if you have a parallel motherboard. That means similar type of computers are there, and if you really want to make sure that your RAM is faulty or not, then you just remove this particular RAM and put it onto another machine. And if it is works fine, then you can conclude that there is no problem with the RAM. Then insert or press properly to fix in the slot. Most of the time, you will find this is the problem. Somewhere the RAM is not fit into the properly into the slots. Then you can just press that particular vertically. You get a fixed sound, and then if it is properly fixed, again restart. If a problem solves, then mostly this is a loose connection or your RAM is coming out of your slots, sir, because these are the problems. Then or best way, if such a problems you found, is better to clean your RAM slot, or you can change or interchange the SIM among the slot. As I said, it is possible that you can shift the position of the RAM without if of course if all the slots are same, then only you can interchange this. Otherwise, most of the motherboard, two slots are for one type of RAM and another two slots are provided for another type of RAM. So this is normally what I can say. One, as you now aware that mostly you will be facing a RAM that is DDR2 DDR4, and every DDR4 DDR1 to DDR4 you can differentiate by the position of their slots. Okay, that is whatever the position of the slots is varied, and based on this position those particular RAM slots are designed for that type of RAM only. So you know which RAM is supported on your motherboard based on that particular slot. Then probably next is that you might have a problem what we call as a chip problems, or a chip. Check the chips compatibility such as same type, same size, same manufacturer. Chip I mean RAM chip problems. Then in that case you have to see that whether it is of the same type, that I mean same capacity, same size, or even the same manufacturer, same clock and same frequency. The RAM should be working on the same frequency. It should have the same size. Then hopefully if a manufacturers are same, then you will not have any problems. Then when it comes to a chip problem, you can remove the chip from the slot and clean the pins of the chip. Most of the time there will be dirt, or there is not a proper contact between the slot, RAM slot, and again into the RAM pins. Then insert or press properly to fix in slots. Check it by connecting it in similar other working motherboards as we have said already. Then check or interchange the SIM against the slots. Just interchange this, or check for chips compatibility such as same type, size and manufacturer. If no beep, no display could be a problem related to RAM. I mean here, if you, as I said, no beep and no display, तुम्हाला beep आला नाही, display आला नाही, काहीच नाही आला, तर कदाचित हा रॅमचा रिलेटेड प्रॉब्लेम असू शकतो, मदरबोर्डचा असू शकतो. रॅमचा 100% when it will be a RAM problem if you get one long beep and two beeps small, and if you goes on continuously, then definitely that is a RAM problem. Then let's come to the next problem that you have to diagnose this. So obviously this is the sixth problem. This is video display related problems. So again, we already said when to perform the post test, you need to have the CPU in place, you need to have RAM in place. Obviously, motherboard has to be there, but at the same time, you should have your VGA card connected. Unless these things are there, then only you will be able to, then only your computer will be able to perform a post test. Otherwise, post is not possible. So let's say what is problems with the video display related problems. I mean, obviously, this is related to VDA display card. Now, in earlier computers, your video display card was an, I will say, either it was external card which was fitted into a respective slots, maybe PCI slots or VG, what we called earlier. Mostly nowadays you will find these are the PCI card or PCE card. Then nowadays, if you see all the motherboards that what is available from last 10 years, most of the times your display card is on board. That means video is on board. Then there are two types of in power. Internal graphics card can be there, or external power graphics card can be there. That means here video cards can be of onboard card or it can be external. As I said, in last 10 years, all the video cards, mostly these are onboard cards. Unless and until you need a multimedia work or very high graphics oriented work, then only you have to have additional video external cards. Check graphics card is onboard or external. For onboard, from backside you will be see that VGA, VDI, HDMI ports along with other conventional ports. How to ensure that your video card is internal? The best way is that you have to see from backside. And if you could able to identify this VGI or video display interface or high density multimedia interface, that is HDMI, if these ports are there on the backside at a conventional ports, then you can 100% say that your video card is on board. Then if graphics card is not detected, it will not post. Obviously, as we said, to for successful post test, you must have a graphic card or video card. Dead graphic card, no post, hence no view. If there is a graphic card is dead, you will not get any view. Check by replacing working graphic cards. You can also ensure that if you have additional working graphic cards, you just remove it and you can check it whether this card is faulty or not. Then check power pins are properly connected or not. Whether cable is changed from onboard graphics to external graphics or vice versa. Then you need to initialize or restart the PC. Here what means here, remember, if you have two graphics cards, then two graphics cards are not automatically initialized. I mean, you have one graphic card as well as you have a VGA card, VGA port. And if you want to connect a monitor, you can remove from graphics and you can connect to VGA. And if you try to see that whether it is working, it will definitely not working because that is not initialized, or your computer bias or post doesn't know which is actually the working card, or which is with which actually cables are connected and which is actually initialized, and it is taken. It actually in motherboard during startup, all the system note downs which are the peripherals, and if that entry is not found there, then you will have a problem. So it is better if you are switching the monitor from graphics to VGA or VGA to graphics, because both are video cards. But while whenever you switch from one to another, it is necessary that you must initialize or restart the PC. Then that will be automatically recognized, and then your video problem could be solved. So these are the some 4 or 5 steps which you have to take care while you are dealing with the video cards. Now finally, that whenever you have these particular problems, mostly the again 5-10% problems are related with cables connected related problems. Though it seems to be minor, you have to check your main power cable is working. If there is video problem, you can always check VGA, VDI, HDMI cable. It is properly working. It is good. Is a good condition. It is properly connected both at the source as well as destination. Then CPU power cable, usually 4 to 8 pin connected to motherboard. You have to see whether CPU power cable is connected to the CPU and it is between CPU and that slot on the motherboard is properly connected. Then main CPU cooling fan connected, usually 3 to 4 pin again. Then GPU pin is normally of 6 to 12 pin connected to the motherboard. So in fact, these are the all power supply pins which are going from motherboard either to CPU or a main CPU fan or to the GPU. Then also you have to ensure that your power supply socket is firmly fixed or properly connected. That is ATX either 20 or 24 pin. Then finally, front panel connectors are connected between the power switch and the power switch pin of motherboard. That this is another socket that is normally provided on the motherboard, and you have to ensure that the power is properly given through that power switch socket. Then there are certain monitor related problems. So most of the times, now these problems you might have faced in the laboratory whenever you are doing practical for the first time, or maybe then at that time whenever you switch on the button, probably you do not get anything on the screen. Then what is need? कोणाचा मायक्रोफोन चालू आहे जरा प्लीज बंद करा ज्याचा असेल ते. Okay, then next is what is monitor related problems. Again, these are very easy to diagnose in day-to-day practices. Also, you do take care. That is, main power cable is connected to the monitor. Whether video cable VGA VDI is properly connected. Then CPU power cable ही properly connect केलेली आहे किंवा नाही. So this is all it is your monitor related problems. And as I said here again, when you talk about these 10 problems, here in 10 problems, we have covered almost the 7 problems. And now I am not going in details related to monitor related problems because our fourth chapter is actually focusing on this particular topic, that is display and various display devices, their characteristics and probably how it works, then what are the different display devices and what is the principle of this. In fact, these are all the topics. From next lecture, that is on Thursday, I will start with the display. This is the only topic that is remaining from the third topic. In fact, I told you also that I will take a test, but I had to what actually I have decided that I will take a test, will test the success of the test what we have now started from yesterday. Actually, I was trying on you people, that is on, yeah, I was supposed to try this particular test on Google Forms and Form Presenter. Then I have also tried this test taking on test modes, that is another third party software. In I got certain problems about in setting of this. In fact, it was a setting problem only, but I have configured 2 times, but you couldn't start your exam tool. But anyway, we have after all deep thoughts, we have discarded that particular system. Now from yesterday, a very good system is in place, and that in fact now yesterday 6 papers are completed. In morning, I have just watched the most difficult paper amongst all of you is the engineering mathematics. 146 students appeared for this particular paper and they have successfully completed. All almost 146 students have just finished their paper from 10:30 to 12:30. That I have watched by sitting at home. I'm also taking lecture from home now. Probably everything is now settled and now there will not be any problems in continuing our lectures. So from again Thursday onwards, I'll start with the fourth topic that is related to your display devices. Mostly, I'm going to assume that you know the functions of TV, how your TV works, what is the concepts of scanning, then what are the different block diagrams of the TV. Because if you compare TV, that means I mean your black and white TV and color TV, what you used to have 10 years back. Of course, now if you see today's TV, that is LCD or LED TV, these principles are same, but internal functions are somewhat different. Internal blocks are different. But now you find that there is no changes in the your display devices, that is monitor or TV. As you know now, your TV can be used as a monitor or monitor can be used as a TV interchangeably. So what is the principle of this? How it works? For that, we'll start this particular, which is really, as I said, in computer hardware maintenance, there are only 2 topics. One is related to power supply, which is purely of electronics people. At the same time, whatever these display devices working and fault finding, this is also mostly related to you people, that is electronics. So again, we'll go in details about this particular fourth chapter, and then later on we'll start with the network. So this is all I wanted to discuss today. So I'll continue on Thursday. If you have got any problems, you can ask. Otherwise, I'll stop here. So if you have got any problems not related to subject or any others, if even if you have, you can ask.